What's up, guys? One of the biggest issues that I run into in post-production and really any kind of sound work at all is actually not anything to do with the sound itself, it's the communication between creatives. So today I want to clear up a little bit of the communication problems that happen and talk about 5 terms that you need to know to be able to talk about sound more effectively. Now, these terms might seem kind of basic, but I've actually heard working professionals from all walks of the industry get these wrong or misunderstand them even on major level projects. So whether you're a video editor or a cinematographer or a director or an actual sound professional or anybody kind of in that range, understanding these concepts is going to get your work that much better, and it's going to allow you to communicate much more effectively with all the creatives around you. The first term you should know is all about recording and getting the best out of your recordings that you can, and that is the difference between on-axis recordings and off-axis recordings. On-axis refers to basically having a sound being picked up by a microphone in the optimal direction that that microphone picks up sound in. So that really goes beyond pointing a microphone in the right direction. It's all about the pickup pattern of the mic and how you want that sound picked up, if you want it picked up at all. Take an omnidirectional microphone, for example. Omnis are all about picking up sound in every direction around the microphone. So technically any recording that you make with it is going to be on-axis. It's going to sound the best that that microphone can produce. This microphone, the Neumann TLM-103, is a cardioid microphone, so it's got a pickup pattern that's sort of heart-shaped in front of it. That sounds really, really good when you're in that optimal placement, but as soon as you start moving kind of off-axis, you can tell it starts rejecting the sound around it. So talking behind it is really not going to sound very good. Talking to the side of it isn't really going to sound very good. But being right in front of it, again, that's the optimal placement for this microphone because of that cardioid shape. So my voice is on axis here versus off axis over here. Now that optimal range is going to differ between microphones, and again, with an omnidirectional, it's going to be all around the microphone. Cardioid, it's going to be a little bit more directional in the front of the microphone. Supercardioid and hypercardioid get even more narrow in their optimal fields, and of course shotgun microphones are the most directional of the bunch, so pretty much anything to the sides or the rear of the microphone is going to get rejected. Now that might seem like a simple concept, but it can really go beyond just pointing the microphone in the right direction. You can make decisions about how you're going to record something depending on your environment. I've done a lot of recordings at airports as well as near busy freeways, and simply knowing that my microphone is going to reject the sounds behind it, I can actually point it away from a freeway or point it away from a sound source that's really kind of obnoxious or it's going to contaminate my recordings. And knowing that that pickup pattern, knowing that I'm getting everything off axis there, really helps mitigate a lot of sounds that I would ordinarily have to clean up a whole lot in post-production or maybe even not be able to use. It can also be really helpful in troubleshooting, just knowing what off-axis or on-axis recordings sound like in case a microphone is accidentally pointed in the wrong direction, or if something doesn't sound quite right and you have to narrow it down in a hurry. Again, just knowing what those characteristics of recordings sound like is going to help you narrow down those problems faster. The next term to know is Foley, and again, that might seem basic, but I've heard plenty of working professionals refer to the entire soundtrack of a film as Foley, when it really only applies to a very specific part of that soundtrack. In post-sound, Foley is the reperformance of very specific, sort of mundane or everyday movements that don't get captured on a set. And these are things like footsteps or cloth movement or picking up and putting down cups or glasses or, any kind of, again, everyday motions that just don't get captured on set because a microphone is much more directed at capturing voices so that you actually have dialogue during a film or a TV show. I might be biased here because I do sound for a living, but I would say that between sound and visuals, sound is the more important component. You can have beautiful visuals, and if your sound doesn't seem good or professional, then it's really going to fall apart. Whereas if you have kind of lackluster visuals, but you have awesome sound, you can kind of save your visuals with a sonic element. That being said, I think Foley is probably the biggest sound component that sets amateur work apart from professional work. It's just all these details that get filled in and bring a production to life and bring a film to life simply by adding in all these layers and characteristics with sound. The best example I can think of is in horror films. Whenever you watch a horror film, if you turn the sound off, it means absolutely nothing to you. It doesn't seem scary at all. It's just kind of a, generally disgusting or kind of confusing plot line visually, and that's really it. As soon as you layer in really good sound, and especially all those little details of the floorboards creaking, or when everything gets really quiet and you can hear the really intimate details of just somebody turning their head to look over their shoulder or just moving around a little bit, that cloth motion that kind of, again, just subtly brings everything to life, that's really, again, what sets everything apart from amateur versus professional stuff. So Foley is a really important thing to know, and it's a really important thing to get right in the workflow because it can really make or break a film. The next term that you need to know that a lot of people get wrong, and it's really kind of hard to find the line between the two, is sound editing versus sound design. I hear so many people referring to one as the other, or talking about sound editing as sort of the whole process, or talking about sound design as, again, the entire soundtrack of a film. They're very specific, different parts of the process, and knowing which one to ask for, knowing which one to do is really going to be helpful in, again, communicating, narrowing every problem and every creative decision down effectively. There are a few different opinions on this depending on who you ask. My general principle when it comes to sound editing versus sound design, sound editing applies to editing the sounds of anything that exists in the real world that I could go out and record right now. If there's guns or explosions or cars, that's generally going to fall into the category of a sound edit, where you're, recording something or you're cutting from a library and you actually sync it with picture. Now, sound design in my mind applies more to sounds that don't really exist in the real world. And this can be really nuanced stuff that makes something real sound more cinematic than it actually is, or it can be stuff that doesn't exist, like alien spaceships, for example. One of the first projects I worked on was a movie called Man of Steel, and the sound designer that was doing that film did a whole synthetic workup on specifically the world engines that come down and start destroying the whole planet. Something like that would definitely fall into the category of sound design, whereas all of the details of, buildings exploding, glass shards coming off of windows, and cars being flipped, that would be more in the category of sound editorial. So again, subtle differences between the two, and the dividing line can fall kind of anywhere depending on who's supervising the project or who's working on it, but it is important to know that there's a difference between the two. The fourth term to know is one that a lot of independent filmmakers, and especially companies or corporations that are looking to hire freelancers, I see them get it wrong all the time. That's the difference between sound mixing versus re-recording mixing. Sound mixing specifically applies in the professional world to mixing sound on set, to actually capturing all that sound with a boom microphone and a bunch of lavaliers into a portable recorder of some kind on a production. Re-recording mixing is actually doing the post-production sound mixing on a film or a television show when you have all the different sounds that you need edited together, everything's already been recorded, and now it's time to actually blend all that stuff and make it sound cinematic. Now, the case can be made, of course, that it really depends on the context that each term's used, and it's really not that big of a deal because somebody somewhere is going to know what you mean, and that's all very well and good. But when it comes to doing something professionally, again, this is one of those terms that knowing what to ask for is going to have people take a project more seriously, it's going to find the right people in the first place, and everybody's going to kind of know exactly what needs to be looked for. And the final term is one that is probably the most important thing when it comes to anything dialogue related, and that is room tone. Room tone should be recorded on every production there is, and it's literally just the tone of a room that's being recorded in. If you're out on a set somewhere, always sit down, capture about 1 minute to 2 minutes of just silence in the space that is being used as a set. It is going to help dialogue editorial so much because inevitably there are going to be cuts in between different scenes or different characters or different perspectives or maybe even different takes. Having room tone allows you to actually smooth those transitions out because it's just empty space and kind of silence, but it matches up with the tonality of all the recordings that were made on production. So again, capturing room tone on a set during the actual production, having everybody quiet down, making sure that everyone takes sound recording seriously for even just those couple of minutes to get everything down the line smoothed out and sounding professional is going to be really, really helpful instead of having to try and recreate the sound of a room after the fact. And there are a few tricks to do that, but they're never going to sound as natural as getting the right recordings from the actual day of shoots. Now, it might seem like you only need to do something like this for narrative feature films or commercials or broadcast television or something like that, but seriously, anytime there's any spoken word or really anything going on visually, it's going to help to have room tone recorded. And this could be something as simple as audiobooks or podcasting, all the way up to those big narrative feature films that are going to go out theatrically. And even if you're not using it to cut in between different dialogue lines or takes or scenes, you can, say, train a denoising plugin on the room tone that you record, and then use that to get much more pristine audio across the board for whatever else you've got recorded. The point is, it can be useful on pretty much any type of content, so I'd highly recommend at least knowing that you can record room tone and that there's a real purpose for it if you haven't already been doing so. Real quick, I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Skillshare is an amazing online learning community where members can find thousands of inspiring classes to explore new skills, dive deeper into passions, and really lose themselves in creativity. Whether you're a seasoned pro or you're just starting out, you'll be able to discover new ways to build and hone real-world skills that are taught by creative professionals who empower you to grow. Skillshare curates ad-free classes that are entirely dedicated to learning, and they're constantly adding more premium classes, so you can explore at your own pace and focus entirely on creativity. When I'm not out in the field recording or sitting in a studio working on sound, I love getting outside and taking photos. One of my favorite adventure photographers is Chris Burkhardt, and he has a class called Outdoor Photography, shooting at sunset, sunrise, and night. Chris breaks down the fundamentals of using light to create stunning visuals, and for less than $10 a month, you can learn directly from him and thousands of other creative pros who are sharing their knowledge on Skillshare. So go check out the link in the description. The first 1,000 people to click on it will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership so you can learn and grow as a creative. So that wraps up today's video. I think it's super important to understand these terms, even if they might seem a little bit basic. The fundamentals of sound are really, really important. It's what all of the other complicated stuff is based off of. So understanding these concepts is going to be really helpful in everything from communicating issues and problem solving to understanding the whole workflow and being able to get the best out of your sound that you can. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, comment below with any questions you might have. I'm over on Instagram at AXK, so come follow me over there. And as always, thanks for watching.